Good afternoon, Steeler Nation. We're excited to come to you with another episode of Steel City Rings podcast. I'm LeeAnn Lohman. I'm joined by Zach Franciscus and Bob Quinn today. And our friend Wade Whiting is off in the city that we all love, Pittsburgh, helping his family today. So he's here in spirit, but I'll be doing my best to kind of fill in for him. So how are you guys?
Wonderful. We're hoping that Ray is going to bump into Mike Tomlin and convince him to do the podcast.
They are fraternity brothers, so we keep feeling like there could be this possibility that maybe it could happen. So hopefully Ray has the in with him. So it's we're still a few weeks away from training camp. So on the news front, things have been rather quiet still, which is probably a good thing. But the big news this week was that Cam Sutton suspension was announced. The NFL has given him an 8-game suspension, which I felt like wasn't entirely surprising considering the baseline is 6 weeks. That all changed after the Ray Rice suspension, that the minimum was 6 weeks. So they came and they gave him 8 weeks, and I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Zach, you want to go or I can go?
I can start out. That's no problem. Okay. I see very little positive about this whole thing. Most of mine is just the stability and what we're sacrificing to bring someone like Cam Sutton in. Because this year, I've reiterated this multiple times on the podcast, this year feels different. This is supposed to be a relaunching year, a reset year, not just in the players we have, but in the culture that we have setting forward. The standard is a standard, having to get that back. No matter what angle you look at the Sutton thing, it's bad. The Steelers know this was coming, so they said this was worthwhile. They didn't know it was coming, so it took them off guard. There's no positive way to look at this for me. It's the Steelers pretty much have set themselves up for a huge amount of pressure where they have to dominate in the first half of the season. So when Cam comes back, he's joining a team that doesn't need him to pick up any slack or anything. That's what we need for everyone to kind of shrug this off. And even then, no one's going to say, this was a great decision. I agree with it. People go, well, I guess it was worth it. Then that's the best we can hope for now in this. So that's my general take on it, because we're sacrificing stability for Sutton, and he's not a starter. And so it's just frustrating to no end to me.
Yeah, and I think, everything we heard kind of leading up to this with the reasoning behind it, he's a great guy, which I don't know how you can, say one with the other with what happened. It's an isolated incident. It's out of character. Well, I get all of that, but when you're dealing with violence and domestic violence and assault and battery and all the nasty stuff that was in this charging document, you know what else is an isolated incident, folks? Murder. Most people don't kill more than one person. And we lock those people up, and we don't let them come back and play football unless your name's Ray Lewis. I mean, it's I don't understand what the thinking was. I mean, we keep saying, has Omar Khan made his first mistake with the receivers, with the corners? In a situation like this, I don't know if you can necessarily call it a mistake, because, I mean, ultimately you are signing him to a veteran minimum contract. And, but kind of I replied to Kevin Adams on social media the other day on X, and I said, look, one of two things is going to be true here. Either we get off to a really good start and we're rolling towards the playoffs like we all hope that is going to happen, and we all know that needs to happen. We got to go 7-2, in which case the defense is playing pretty well. And the reality is Darius Rush, Corey Trice, or the mystery guest, is playing pretty well as the third corner. So either things are going really well halfway through the season, in which case, if Cam Sutton does come back, he's not pushing the guys who are doing well off the field, or things go really bad the first half of the season. And with the hard schedule we have in the second half, we got no shot of making the playoffs. Yeah. In which case, putting Cam Sutton on the field makes no sense, because you might as well develop the young guys. Yeah. So if we do good, we don't need him. And if we do bad, we don't need him. So why the heck did we sign him?
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I agree with you. I've been pretty angry about this ever since we found out this was going to happen. So just so, we can be clear, I pulled up the affidavit of the allegations against him. And this is what it says. During the argument, Sutton picked up the woman and slammed her. The woman is the mother of his children and his girlfriend, into a wall and then bit her on the neck, leaving a quarter-size abrasion that bled. He then grabbed the woman by the face and neck and choked her, causing her to briefly lose consciousness. He continued into the living room where Sutton held her down by her hair and struck her twice with his fist, causing a knot to form. I guess the police were called and he left the house and was gone before the police got there to be able to tell his side of the story. And that's when the arrest warrant was issued for him. And I guess we're at this point, I feel like, in the league where we need to make like a hard stand on this stuff. Do you know what I mean? We can't continue to allow it to continue. And I'm not the only one that feels that way. For what it's worth, Will Compton tweeted out that Cameron Sutton assaulting and strangling his girl and only being suspended 8 games is absolutely insane. And I have to say, I mean, in a rare moment, I actually kind of agree with Compton here. It's just crazy to me that this feels like it's worth it to us to take this chance. Because the other thing is, I think what you pointed out, Bob, is really valid. But something that people are forgetting, these people who are saying, oh, well, he'll come in. I think it's actually week 10 when he gets back because of our bye week. So he misses those whole first 8 games. Then we have a bye, and then he comes back week 10. That he is also not training with the team, practicing with the team, doing film study with the team. Do you know what I mean? So he's missing all of those things too. And we've seen it before when guys get pulled off the couch and brought in. It takes time to get their sea legs and to be like in football shape. There's a big difference between working out in the gym and I'm sure he works really hard and getting hit on a football field. You know what I mean? That's a different kind of workout. And so to me, I think it's, there's the big picture, I guess. I just don't understand it. I didn't understand it when they signed him, why would we even do this? There has to be somebody else out there that we could find as a backup corner rather than taking him on.
And by all accounts, he's a super smart guy. He's like very intelligent. And I think it's kind of good and bad. And I hate to take a shot at Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin here. But if my cornerback, who hasn't played for us for last season and who won't play for us until 10 weeks into the season and
was misused while he was in Detroit.
Right. But also can't study with the team, can't pick it up. Right. So you're telling me that because he's so smart and he knows the defense inside and out because he played here, we haven't changed the coverages of the defenses in the last 2 years? Didn't we just run Matt Canada out of town for not adjusting the offense on the fly?
I have no doubt that he's smart, and I have nothing, against Cam Sutton. Do you know what I mean? I thought if none of this would happen, I would be thrilled with bringing him back. I think it makes a lot of sense. Do you know what I mean? But we got to be honest here. The only reason he was available to us cheap is because of the trouble he's in. And, I think it's just something that at some point, when do you say, like, this isn't what our organization stands for? Mike Florio brought it up. Somebody from Steeler Nation did an article on it yesterday or today that the Steeler fans sound like a bunch of hypocrites. We screamed and stomped and yelled about Deshaun Watson. Do you know what I mean? In retaliation for all of the Ben Roethlisberger comments over the years. But then now we're facing a similar kind of situation, and we are not giving it that same energy. Do you know what I mean? Many fans are just kind of complacent about this.
And we don't know if there's more to happen. We were talking about in the studio before with Ray Rice and the video coming out. What if during that time where he's not with the team and here's a way that stuff happens, that his partner says, oh, wait a second, I'm actually going to stand up to the football player partner in my life and has video or has more proof and comes forward. It could get much uglier. We're still at the beginning and it's ugly.
He can make her mad.
It does. So that was an excellent point when you brought up that he's not going to be with the team. He's not going to train with it. So there's so much more time for him to get into more trouble because I understand that, everybody that the Steelers have talked to and that we've heard interviews from have said, oh, I can't believe he did this. I can't believe. That's honestly what you hear from a lot of guys who don't want to admit that they've seen it happen, but they don't want to be the guy that didn't say anything. So you have to wonder what Cam Sutton is out there. Is this the Cam Sutton that is actually Cam Sutton that just no one else ever talked about? Or is this really a blip on Cam Sutton's radar? Either way, it's not worth it to me. But
even if it's an isolated incident, though, like Bob said, all kinds of crimes are isolated incidents. You know what I mean? People kill people in fits of passion or rage all the time. And so I'm not equating this to murder, but at what, he could have killed her. Do you know what I mean? He could have really hurt her. And so at what point do we say, like, as a franchise, like, we don't stay, we're not standing for this at all? Because that's what it's going to take for the NFL to get more serious. It's going to take franchises to say, we don't want this guy back.
Yeah, and the sad truth of the business of the NFL is, let's say the Steelers, who I get the reasons. So all those people out there on social media who have been saying, well, we get him for the second half of the year, and okay, I get the reasons. I understand the reasons, but the bottom line is, you want to get serious about curbing domestic violence. Let's be honest here, folks. The NFL, some of us liked it, some of us didn't. They reached out to Taylor Swift. They made her the star of last season, arguably a bigger star than even the guys on the field were, because they were flashing the camera on her constantly. I don't care. A pop star shows up to the game, of course you're going to show her on camera, especially as somebody of that level. But if you're making all these inroads with female fans and you're highlighting Taylor Swift as now a feature in the NFL, why are you? I don't get it. So you got a domestic violence case here, and you just, okay, it's only 8 games. Going back years, I mean, let's be honest, Ray Rice was getting 6 games. Mm-hmm. The video came out. He never played another game again. Folks, he wasn't convicted. He wasn't convicted of that crime.
But look, don't you think if we saw a video of Cameron Sutton doing exactly what he was accused of in this accusation, so assuming all of the things that they said he did are true, and we saw him truly banging his wife into a wall, biting her on the neck, causing her to bleed, punching her in the face, choking her. Mm-hmm. I mean, it feels to me like he would be in Ray Rice's situation and not coming back, so it feels like if we actually saw that video evidence, then he would be in that same situation. And so I'm guessing because the girlfriend is not going through with pressing charges. Do you know what I mean? We're taking this more lightly, which is crazy because domestic violence victims fail to press charges all the time because they are terrified. And this woman has to deal with him for the rest of her life. He's the father of her 3 children. So there's no getting out of dealing with him unless he's in prison. And that's not happening over domestic violence, not serious jail time.
Yeah. And I was on the Steelers Sanctuary podcast on Monday, and Dave and I talked about this. And I'm curious to get the reaction from you two, because we talked about, we're older guys, and, when the Ray Rice situation came up, you knew what he did. If you even followed the story at all, you knew he punched a girl out on the elevator. And it was good enough that he got 6 games until the video came out. What did everybody expect to see on the video when there's a charging document that says he knocked her out? What would we expect to see on a video of Cam Sutton choking and biting? So all of a sudden, because we saw it with our own eyes, have we devolved that far that we don't trust the fact that what he's charged with didn't really happen?
Yeah.
But if
that's exactly what you're saying. Because clearly his girlfriend is saying it wasn't as serious as it sounded or something to get these charges, because choking someone to the point of unconsciousness is a felony. So she obviously said something that got the sheriff's office to drop those charges down. And so to me, it sounds like the NFL is willing to just roll along with that. Well, she said she was there and we weren't. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, I think if you see that real video evidence of how graphic it is, there's and how aggressive it was, there's no denying the severity of what you did. Like you couldn't try to claim that Ray Rice, just kind of chuffed her on the chin or gave her a little tap. I mean, he hit that woman hard, and that was obvious from that video. And so I feel like if we had the same situation here, how graphic it is would change people's minds. But I don't think that that's fair. I mean, I think it is what it is, whether we see it or not.
Yeah, and just one thing before Zach goes. So the Ray Rice thing, in the document, it says he knocked her out in the elevator. And then the video came out, he knocked her out in the elevator. Right. What, did people think she couldn't take a punch? It was just a grazing blow or something? I don't get it. I mean, to me, I thought the Ray Rice thing was ridiculously egregious for the fact that, okay, I punish you, but now I really punish you. What do you think, Zach?
Thing came out initially, it was a Ravens thing, so I wanted to be harsher at it. But as it kept going, I was like, oh no, this is serious. And then the 6 games right off the bat, I was it seemed really light, like a tap on the wrist, just in general. The way I was, if you put your hands on a woman in any way, that was unacceptable. But there seemed to be this sliding scale of acceptability. Well, you hit her, but you didn't knock her out. Well, you knocked her out, but it was only for this long. Well, how much did you? There seems to be all these specific keywords that they're looking for, and it's incredibly upsetting. And it seems almost wrong to want to talk about the football side of it. But what happens if we do poorly in this first half of the season? Now all of a sudden, not only do we have the Cam Sutton to deal with, which it could get uglier as we're dealing with, now we have to go back and find someone else, which I don't want to say it, but at this point, it's probably going to be Patrick Peterson. So not only did we not fit the Patrick Peterson thing, we've made the situation worse. We've hurt our reputation. We've hurt our female fans. There's no positives with this. So because we don't have the video, or else it seems like a really weak reason for everyone to say, well, we'll wait and see it, because you don't know exactly what happened again, but she is not waiting and seeing. She knows what happened at this point. And so like I know you said, there's a lot of victim shaming that could happen here that she's worried of. So how long it takes her to come forth doesn't matter to me. The fact that it happened at all makes this a non-Steeler thing. It's against what we do. I don't like that. And a lot of people consider the Ben Roethlisberger. No, this is against what we do. This is.
Well, actually, go ahead, Zach. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was just going to reiterate. It doesn't sit well with me. Like bad pit in the stomach doesn't sit.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the Mike Florio thing on the Ben Roethlisberger, like Florio was very early on the Cam Sutton. He really said, hey, look, don't be expecting 6 games here, because he made a point of putting out what exactly happened. But to compare the Sutton thing to Deshaun Watson and completely ignore the vitriol that Steeler fans put up with from Cleveland Brown fans about Ben Roethlisberger, that they're still putting up with, as, okay, you're hypocrites because of Deshaun Watson. No, we're paying back the Deshaun Watson crowd for the Ben Roethlisberger stuff. I don't think you can equate Cam Sutton's violent outburst to Deshaun Watson or the Ben Roethlisberger allegations, which are both bad. They both should have been suspended. I get it. I understand. But, I mean, to me, the violence is just so much worse. I don't understand. And getting from a football standpoint, you're right, Zach. It kind of feels bad to talk about it. But at the same time, we have to talk about it because we've got no other choice. And I know you mentioned Patrick Peterson. We have $18 million in cap space.
Yeah.
Stephon Gilmore is still sitting out there. If we're going to go get somebody, and I think we should, I think he is by far the best option at this point, because 2 years ago, he's still a top 10 corner in the league. Last year, he's top 10%. I think he was ranked 36th in the league by the dubious Pro Football Focus. Now,
do you think they signed him, though, knowing that Sutton is coming? Do you know what I mean? Like, to me, Peterson feels like a little bit disposable.
Yeah, I think if you're really all in and trying to win, why wouldn't you get the former Defensive Player of the Year who's still at the top of his game? I mean, you're probably going to have to pay him, $10 million a year. But, if you can get him, I mean, and at this point, training camp's a couple weeks away. He's going to play somewhere. Maybe you call him up and say, hey, $10 million guaranteed. Come on in. We'll sign you. I mean, even if he's fallen off a little bit, let's say he's gone from a top 10% corner to a top 25% corner, he's still a lot better than what Patrick Peterson or Shandon Sullivan or a guy like that would be.
Yeah. The problem with that is you bring a guy like Gilmore in, and you said you're going to have to pay him. All of a sudden, that starts to eat away at we need a wide receiver money. At what point does that start to get in the way of that? So now not only has Cam Sutton gotten in the way of himself, in the way of the defensive backs in the secondary, but now he's gotten in the way of our offensive plans. because I absolutely, I'm fine with spending the money for Gilmore, but that has to be done in a vacuum. It can't be done, and let's go look for that big wide receiver. Because you have to have some cap space to play around with depending on what happens with injuries and stuff. So you can't just go to 0 on 2 guys. So it doesn't seem like it's something that would be worthwhile for someone like Gilmore if we still want that wide receiver. Now, if the wide receiver has been a smokescreen the whole time, it's just kind of sitting back with like a glass of cognac, just they think we're good, then that's one thing. But if we're serious about wanting to get a number 2 receiver to come in next to Pickens, which I know, LeeAnn, you said that a lot of the reports around Pickens have been positive. The maturity things have been good.
Yeah, today Caboli and Chris Carter said on Locked On Steelers that he is a vastly more mature Pickens than he was last season. So they were pleased to see that. I told you guys, I kind of said it, unsolicited. It wasn't like somebody asked them, hey, how does he seem? Do you know what I mean? So then they would feel obligated. They were talking about how they don't think the Steelers will sign. Caboli was saying he doesn't think the Steelers will bring Ayuk in. He thinks that's a dead deal. But he said, the good news is that the Pickens seems much more mature.
Right. And one thing I think you got to remember too is there are no wide receivers on the street, Zach, that you can go get at a free agency. That's got to happen through trade. Gilmore's on the street, free agent. You can get him, and if you use half your cap space to get your number 2 corner, because let's face it, they signed Gilmore. He's the number 2 corner. Dante Jackson is now the nickel. That's a really good set of cornerbacks as far as I'm concerned. So if you're going all in with 1-year deals with quarterbacks and, hey, we're not going to sign Pat Freiermuth before training camp. Maybe we're going to go into next year with George Pickens. Then I would rather have a guy like Gilmore. Either Roman Wilson is going to be the clear number 2, which is what I personally hope happens, or they've got to make a trade. And if they're making a trade, they can do some cap magic. I don't think they should pay Gilmore $15 million or anything, but there's some guys out there that on the team, they could restructure, they could do a little bit more, they could play some games with the cap space, if they trade for, a guy. But at this point, if Ayuk's probably out and who knows day to day what's going to happen there, if I don't know who the big name wide receiver we're going to get at this point is. Gilmore is a guy we could get who's a name who's good.
Yeah. I want to go back to something you said before about the comparison of Deshaun Watson to what's going on with Cam Sutton and like what happened with Ben Roethlisberger in the past. And I guess from my perspective, it feels like it's important to look at like those each in their own incident. Do you know what I mean? Like Zach said, like a sliding scale, like it's not like a sliding scale with these, do you know what I mean? And like, oh, what you did is not so bad, because we can't measure what the impact was on the victim or victims in Watson's case. And, I think that it's really hard. Like you look at what Sutton did, and if the allegations are true, which she said happened to her, then you're right. That is like this horribly violent, extreme act. But I think it's important too to note that, not making excuses for Ben Roethlisberger, but it always sounded like whatever happened with him was like a drunken night of debauchery where he made some bad choices, right? So not a little bit of an excuse at all, but like, again, like an isolated incident. What happened with Watson to me always sounded very predatory. And I think that's pretty sick behavior.
Good word.
I have a friend who's a professional massage therapist who works in Washington and has worked with sports teams. And, she said like that was like so unheard of. Like these guys get these massages all the time. Do you know what I mean? This is something that professionals do. And these comments that came in on Twitter, like, oh, well, these women are asking for it. Do you know what I mean? They're basically like hookers. Like that's ridiculous. You say, first of all, even if they were prostitutes, you have the right to not be sexually assaulted. And even if, in the job they're in, which is a professional massage therapist, they aren't doing that job to like, this isn't like the Robert Kraft massage, where you're hoping for the happy ending. This is a professional situation. These women are trained, or in some cases their men are trained to do this job. And they go into it with all faith that, whoever they're working with is going to be appropriate. So he sort of prayed and used his power and authority to manipulate, almost 100 women. I mean, that's sick. That's really predatory behavior.
And I think that's a great point, LeeAnn, about your friend. These are professional people. It's so unusual for an NFL player to, number one, when they find a therapist who works well
Yes.
for them to solicit other therapists.
No, you stay with the same person forever.
I think he ended up getting more professionals than he thought he would get when he was not looking for. I mean, let's face it, where he was advertising and trying to get these people, he wasn't looking for professional massages.
Right.
He was looking for the other thing. And I think that's why he got in so much trouble. And it's such a, and
when you want a hooker, there's all kinds of women and escorts that you can pay money to, and then you have that kind of situation and they can come pretend to be your massage therapist. Don't pretend like you're doing something. And I wouldn't care if he did that. If I found out he'd hired 96 hookers, I don't really care what he does in his private life. It's a transactional relationship. Everybody knew what was happening. The women were okay with it. He was okay with it. I don't have an issue with that. What I do have an issue with is pretending it's something that it's not, and then taking advantage of a position of authority.
Exactly. Go ahead, Zach.
It almost seems like I forget the exact story, but it's like everyone has a certain number that when it hits that they can't really think outside of it. Like for some people, it's $1 million. Or I think it got to a number of women that people literally didn't know how to take it. They were like, well, because if it's like 4 or 5, it's like, oh well, that's a pattern. Almost 100, and we're talking about mixtures of all different stories and places and like you name the situation, he was in it. So this isn't just a cycle. Like this is like the predatory word you use. That is exactly what happened here. So there is like no comparison between a Sutton situation and
I just think
they're
vastly different situations. I think it's unfair to call us hypocrites. Do you know what I mean? Because we're viewing the situations differently. I don't know that I think that's fair. I don't know that I think it's fair to compare Ben Roethlisberger's situation to Deshaun Watson's situation. All three of these situations are very different. I think it's really valid for fans of all the teams to be upset about all three of them. Do you know what I mean? I never had begrudged anybody who stayed angry at Ben Roethlisberger for 15 years or whatever. Like, hey, he made a dumb choice, and you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. I mean, he kind of got what he asked for.
The only other thing I'd add about Watson, the deep-seated sexism to think that massage therapists were basically
sex workers,
prostitutes.
Yeah.
And to advertise, I think what really got him in trouble was he went looking for hookers, but he advertised for professionals. And when he got professionals who weren't prostitutes, he ran into a whole bunch of trouble. What he did to me was, because he just automatically assumed that anybody who answers an ad looking for a massage, wink, wink, we know if you're on here, you're getting this. And that's my biggest problem. I agree with you on Ben. Was there bad judgment? Yeah, probably. Was there, maybe a little bit of, regret after the fact by the other party? Yeah, maybe. But bottom line is, it was 2 isolated incidents. Yes, they happened kind of close together, but they were not very similar in how they went down. And this is, like Zach said, 96. I mean, and
there was never even enough evidence to even remotely pretend to press charges, let alone convene a grand jury or anything else. You know what I mean? So I don't know. To me, they just all three feel very differently. And you're talking about however many women it was. I keep saying 96. I don't remember if that's actually the number. It's in that ballpark. You're talking about all these
women.
It
should be.
Right. You're talking about all these people that walked away from their situation, and the families and their husbands and all of these people, their children, the ripple effect that kind of like targeted harassment causes is hard, impossible to measure. Do you know what I mean? And so to me, I just, I don't know, trying to pretend like you can give them like 6 weeks of therapy or something and then put him back out there sounds like trying to reform Ted Bundy and letting him go back to working,
And in fairness, according to the New York Times, just, for those of you Deshaun Watson fans watching whose heads are exploding, New York Times said it was 30 women, not 96.
Okay, then 30, whether it's 30 or 96, sure.
Yeah, so okay, a third. Is that still bad, Deshaun Watson fans? Is it okay?
Honestly, that should tell you something, that we said the number 96 and none of us blinked. It did not
Where
seem
did I
like
come
an
up with
exorbitant
that? I
number
always
to all
thought
of
that
us.
it was like almost 100.
And we talk about
I think maybe
character
it's
things.
formal
Like
accusations.
I was wondering if that was like the ones that weren't paid off, or but when you
Yeah.
talk about character issues being brought up like this, you can say what I know. Ben talks constantly about how he was young and stupid, and the idea of who Big Ben was, and that persona got into his head, and he felt invincible. And when you are a young person and you feel invincible and you have a bad support system around you, he's going to get into trouble. But it seemed to, at least to me, like that changed very quickly. Like
Yeah.
Ben's like, I cannot do this anymore. Number one, I won't live, but I'm going to cause other people irreparable harm if I keep doing this. And he turned it around. You can say whatever you want about him on the field or how he was a leader. He was an exemplary human being, as far as I know, to that extent. From, if what everyone says about Cam Sutton is true, and this is a one-off, and from this point on, we see that he's contrite about all this stuff. But 30 women, that shows your character more than
I
anything.
also
That means,
don't. Did
number
you
one,
feel like
that
there
your
was
support.
remorse? Like there was remorse, and he felt so bad, and do you know what I mean? He was trying to make it right. I didn't.
I think he felt
Oh,
bad that he lost a year of pay, and then the Cleveland Browns rewarded him with the
Well,
biggest contract in NFL history.
Yeah, and he lost a year of pay, and it panned out for him like tenfold. It was better than what he could have ever probably dreamed of. Do you know what I mean? I will say I agree with you about Ben. I do think that Ben, it would be impossible to say that that man didn't turn his life around, whether it's the way he came to religion or his wife or having kids or just getting past the age of 25. I don't know, all of it together. It's impossible to say that he didn't turn his life around and change and become a better person. And I guess at the end of the day, all we hope from anybody is that, we all make mistakes. We all screw up, to varying degrees, and that, you grow from those mistakes and learn from them and become a better person. Hopefully this helps Ben raise his son to be a better human, you know what I mean, to make better choices. So you kind of hope for that. And I hope that Deshaun Watson walked away, with a similar experience. I don't know that I felt like we've seen that, but I don't know him personally. So the same goes for Cam Sutton. Maybe something's been simmering under him for all these years, and this was this horrible isolated incident that he needed to, as a cry for help to turn his life around and get the help he needs or something. I certainly hope so, especially if he's going to be a Steeler.
Yeah, I know there's fans of him, but I mean he's a 1-year deal, and with this, and let's face it, if halfway through the season, he's just a break glass in case of injury guy. I mean, I can't, I don't, I couldn't see them signing him for 2025. If you played well enough in 2024, then you don't need him in 2025.
Right.
If you didn't play well enough in 2024, getting a guy who, I mean, yes, he's not a cornerback one. He got forced into cornerback one, but he got roasted as a cornerback one. I mean, he's an older corner. All of a sudden he's going to be your viable second or third guy, especially with $125 million worth of cap space. And to me, that's just another reason why, as much as I like Mason McCormick, and I think he may be the guard of the future to replace James Daniels, it's real missed opportunities in the 4th round to take a cornerback.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how that all pans out. It'll be interesting to watch heading into the rest of the season. All right, so Dick LeBeau wrote a new book. It's called Legendary. It just came out. I got mine in the mail Wednesday evening and did a bunch of articles out of it that you can see on Steeler Nation. And it was really interesting. He talks about, and he said before, that 2008 defense that won the Super Bowl against the Arizona Cardinals was his favorite defensive unit of all time, even more so than the 2005 group. He just felt like it was such a special group. And we thought it would be worth it to just talk about LeBeau for a few minutes. After reading that book, I was really inspired by just what a tremendous leader he is and like all of these amazing things he's done. He tells these incredible stories about like playing golf with Arnold Palmer and playing guitar with Garth Brooks and how he had a part in a movie when he was over in the Philippines. And like he's done so many cool things. It's like the life everybody would want to live, on top of spending 14 years in the NFL and then coaching for all those years. He spent almost 60 years in the NFL by the time it was all said and done, and certainly had a tremendous impact on the Steelers. And you hear there's player interviews in there where the players chime in and talk about LeBeau, and it's very much this common theme of just the impact that he made on their lives and on their playing, and how, you know, he supported his players. He coached with respect, treated them with respect. He wasn't one to yell and scream, and really focused on this idea of the defense as a whole.
You know, another interesting thing about him is people forget he's still in the top 10 all time in interceptions, folks.
Yeah.
He was a Hall of Fame player, one of those few Hall of Fame players. It seems to happen more in football than in other sports, where a Hall of Fame player can translate to a long, great coaching career.
Yeah.
He didn't have much success as a head coach, but I mean, let's face it, he coached the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah.
You know, who wins there?
Yeah.
He's the father of the 3-floor blitz scheme that the Steelers kind of turned into in the 90s. And then, you know, when he left and came back as the coordinator, he's just, one thing that always impressed me so much about LeBeau is I'm a Hall of Fame cornerback. I'm essentially a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. I've designed this defense that nobody can figure out. And yet I take a guy like Troy Polamalu and I tell him he can freelance. I take a guy like Casey Hampton and he can freelance. And especially the last couple of years, just juxtaposing this against Matt Canada, who not only could not adjust, but didn't give his players the freedom to adjust. And you've got a guy who's maybe the smartest defensive coordinator and who I think is the best defensive coordinator in NFL history. Sorry, Bill Belichick. I think Dick LeBeau's better. But to give the freedom, have the confidence that, hey, I don't know everything.
Right.
So if I've got these world-class great players who I look at and they think they can do things better, I'm going to let them try it. And worst case scenario is, okay, you didn't know better. Let's do it my way now. But just to have that confidence in that, I mean, to me, that's the kind of leader that you want to hold up and you really want to highlight. And I think that's who Dick LeBeau was. I know I'm good, but I don't need to tell everybody how good.
Right.
What always impressed me about Dick LeBeau was his ability to communicate no matter what player he was speaking to. He could talk to Troy and get through to him, but the one player that he managed to get through to, he got through to James Harrison. And when James Harrison talks about Dick LeBeau, James Harrison becomes a different person. It's like, this is the one person I will let myself be vulnerable for. No one else in the world gets that. Probably not even his family to some extent. But when it's Dick LeBeau, you can just see. I forget what the interview was. I think whenever he retires, that you saw James Harrison cry a little bit. Like so to be able to not just get through and not just impact, but to have a lasting human resonance in someone like James Harrison, that means something. Not just as a coach, but as a human being, a person of character. So that always impressed me. That no matter the NFL and Roger Goodell and all the authorities that couldn't rein James Harrison in, but Dick LeBeau could. And that's
he talked about that in the book, that those first couple of times that Harrison got cut by the Steelers, that he it was before LeBeau came, and he would come in and he would be on the field and they tell him to do something, he'd be like, I can't do this shit, and he'd walk off. I don't understand what's going on. And James Ferrier was there. James Ferrier and Harrison had come in at the same time. Ferrier had already been in the league for a couple of years, and he kept trying to tell him, like, man, you got to just try. Like, all they want to see is effort. He's like, so even if you don't know what you're doing, just go hit something as hard as you can. Do you know what I mean? So they know that you're trying, because then they can coach you from there. And Harrison just wouldn't. I mean, it was like this huge chip on his shoulder, and his ego was getting in the way. Brett Kiesel told stories about him in the weight room those first couple of years when he got cut. He would tell guys like, this is my equipment, and like that he owned a piece of equipment and wouldn't let other guys get on it and stuff. They're like, what? This guy is crazy. And for some reason, when LeBeau came, and Keith Butler should get credit too, they really showed him like a they were able to speak to him in a way that did, you're right, got through to him, and it totally changed him. Without Dick LeBeau, there would have been no James Harrison. There would have been no 100-yard interception return for a touchdown. There would have been no Debo or anything else, because he was on his last leg with the Steelers when LeBeau came in that year in 2004. And I mean, it turned everything around for him. Harrison somehow realized that he had to start acting differently towards his teammates and, all of these things. And yeah, it made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, can you imagine? I mean, young, out of control James Harrison in the weight room. The fortitude it must have took for a guy like Kiesel to go up to him. I mean, let's face it, James Harrison's a scary guy.
Oh yeah.
And if you've ever seen some of his workout videos, hey, this equipment is mine. Oh yeah, Rook, hit the brakes. No, I don't. What do you mean it's yours, Rook? And he picks it all up. I mean, he's amazing. Just to grind it into Cleveland a little bit. Maybe people know this, maybe they don't. Dick LeBeau was drafted by the Cleveland Browns in 1959. Yep. They cut him. They also passed on Ben Roethlisberger.
Yep.
So they lost out on a Hall of Fame cornerback that could have played for him. And let's face it, Cleveland in the 60s, Jim Brown, they were pretty good. Yeah. Maybe they win a title. Maybe they actually see the Super Bowl. But that being said, so now you lost out on Hall of Fame Dick LeBeau, who maybe if he signs with Cleveland and goes with them, that he becomes he becomes a coach for them. Who knows what happens? So you lost out on LeBeau, you lost out on Roethlisberger. Have a nice afternoon, Cleveland.
I remember, I'm pretty sure it was against Cleveland, that I didn't know that you could break someone's eye. I didn't know that was possible until he did it. Yeah. And he did it through a helmet. But then when you go back and look at that play, you're like, oh yeah, that'll break an eye. That'll break. But whenever I think of James Harrison and that 2008 year, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that primetime Ravens game where James Harrison pretty much said, yeah, this is going to be my game, and I'm just going to, from the beginning to the end, dominate it. I mean, I've seen TJ Watt take over games before, but Joe Flacco couldn't do anything. No one could do anything against James Harrison. It wasn't the Steelers' defense. Like, I think everyone else in the defense just kind of sat back and watched James Harrison do his thing for a whole game. And I think that game swung the defensive player of the year towards him. So, because it always felt like no matter how good James Harrison was, he was always fighting to be relevant. And I don't understand.
To be respected, I think. Respected, accepted. You know what I mean? To feel like he was accepted. Yeah. He was never quite accepted.
So, and maybe it was the bristly way he just kind of was around people. But I never really held that against him. Well, all I wanted in a Steelers linebacker is a guy who wanted to come in, he'd people really hard, do his job, and go home. That's honestly what I expected out of, kind of a lunch pail guys. And James Harrison embodied that. So yeah. I love when he got it. I was very upset at the NFL. That started me against Roger Goodell. I was like, okay, I get that, but stop finding the poor guy stop using him as the poster boy for your fines. So
he played at a tough time, like as the league was changing and these safety rules were coming in, and he was really meant to play like 5 years earlier or something, just a little bit earlier. He was right there on the cusp.
According to Mike Tomlin, James Harrison and those 2008 Steelers were the reason for the player safety policy.
Yes. Yeah. Ryan Clark and Ike Taylor have talked about that too, that like they were literally taught to like go put people to sleep, and they were proud of it. They wore it like a badge of honor. Do you know what I mean? They would talk about their body count. And yeah, the league had to start making changes because of that group that year. Was so aggressive and so tough. I mean, they weren't doing anything illegal, but people were getting hurt. Yeah.
Well, and just to piggyback, I mean, LeBeau reaching James Harrison, who's a tough, mean guy. I mean, kind of, we talked about this on the Mount Rushmore episode last week. Greg Lloyd and Dick LeBeau were peas in a pod. They got along very well, and believe me, James Harrison is scary. Greg Lloyd is scarier. Yeah. And when he played, James Harrison wanted to hurt you. Greg Lloyd executed the plan. Okay. And Dick LeBeau has said on multiple occasions that if he had one player to start a defense, it would have been Greg Lloyd. So something in Dick LeBeau's persona really reached those rough, ragged, on the edge guys to rein them in to make them great. And again, level of communication, like you guys were saying, the fact that he could reach guys like that and then turn around and have equal, with a guy like Troy who was so soft-spoken, and he could motivate both of those guys completely differently. He treated them like individuals, which is something I think Mike Tomlin is very good at. He treats his players like individuals. They're men. They're not just numbers on a jersey and, hey, whatever happens, happens.
I think that you're that coach.
Belichick.
Yeah, I think if you're that coach, particularly a coach that played in the league and had a successful career like that, even if it wasn't like you didn't have a Dick LeBeau career, but Mike Tomlin played in college, like he has some understanding of what it's like to be on that side of the field, and I think that earns you some automatic respect with the players. I mean, if you've played sports, you know that there is this like locker room respect, you know what I mean, for the fellow guys that are out there doing what you do. And you know that when you have coaches that have done it, they understand how you feel and where you're coming from. So for guys that didn't play professionally that coach, I'm not to say that they don't get respect, but I think it's earned in a different way than like the automatic step forward you get when somebody like LeBeau walks into your locker room. Do you know what I mean? He knows, and you can't dispute that.
No, with LeBeau, and I think it was always game recognizes game. It was either you might for a lot of people outside Pittsburgh, you might be a little old guy, but you look in those eyes like, oh, you got the same fire I do, okay, and you know why. There was an understanding there. I think it was like they had to build it, but I think there was almost an instant thing when you see people like, okay, there's just a quiet confidence about them that you can feel in another person. I'm not speaking from experience, for the record. This is just what I'm aware of in football.
Kind of makes you wonder, what if nobody held Antonio Brown back in the infamous incident Ryan Clark always talks about, where Antonio Brown went after Dick LeBeau? What if they actually just let him go? What would have happened?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
He might have gotten laid out a lot sooner.
Yeah, that's the truth.
ABC, ESPN would have started a lot sooner.
Yeah, we wouldn't have needed Burfict to hit him.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate you all tuning in today. Please do us a favor and like the podcast, share it, subscribe it. Check us out on social media. You can see our QR code up there in the top corner that you can scan that takes you to our link tree with all of our pages. When you like the podcast or subscribe to the podcast, it helps the algorithm on YouTube and helps us out a little bit. We are open to your feedback back. Please shoot us an email, send us a DM on social media to any of our individual pages or to the show page. And we'd love to hear what you think. Tell us your Dick LeBeau memories. Tell us what you think about Cam Sutton. We want to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, just one other quick thing. Follow us on TikTok. We've started releasing daily videos with player profiles for the upcoming season, some takes on TJ Watt getting disrespected by ESPN. We're going to be putting these out daily, so comment on those. Let us know what you think, and your comments there we'll make sure to bring up on the next podcast.
Awesome. Thank you all so much, everybody. Have a good day.